Hey guys, welcome to book review number 42. A Chant to Sooth Wild Elephants. It's a little bright. A Chant to Sooth Wild Elephants by Jaed Coffin. I'll look at that a second. Okay, so what this book is about is it's about a half Thai, half white American who I believe was born in the United States, whose parents had met in Thailand, his dad being a soldier in the Vietnam War, his mother being a Thai woman. And they immigrated to the United States. This is all kind of like the backstory. And had 3 children, one of them being Jaed. And so Jaed grew up in the United States as a Thai American, but was always conflicted about his roots between his native country, or his country that he grew up in, the United States, and his Thai, heritage. So what Jaed decided to do was, after graduating from college with a degree in philosophy, or I should say during his last semester, his last time in college, before graduating with a degree in philosophy, he decided to move to Thailand to become a monk in a rural temple for what amounted to about 3 months. And this book is about that story. Kind of the things that struck me were how he really focused on his race, which I guess in a lot of travel books it kind of focuses on the effect that the society has upon you. But both with this book and the book I'm going to be reviewing shortly, which is Catfish and Mandala, both the authors are natives or half-natives of the countries that they're visiting. So it becomes much more there's a lot more self-reflection in these books. Trying to think. When he first goes into this temple, he meets some of his relatives who he's only met a couple times in his life. He had been to Thailand previously on just like visits, but only as sort of like a younger child. So he met some people that he hadn't seen in probably 10 or 15 years, him being 21, 22 at this point. And kind of got to reacquainted with them a little bit on sort of a very surface level, at least initially, because of the lack of, interaction, obviously because of geographic space over such a long time period. But the other thing that he mentioned early on in the temple was how lonely it was. Now, in a way, this helped him because a big part of becoming a Buddhist monk, and he was I should say, I'm going to say 2 things about being a Buddhist monk. The first one is, in Buddhism, unlike becoming a monk in the West, it's not a lifelong commitment. Matter of fact, a huge percentage of the population become monks, but only in a fraction of those circumstances do they become monks for the rest of their lives. Most of the time they become monks anywhere from a few months to a couple years, to, like I said, the rare instance where they become monks for life. So anyway, one of the things that he mentioned early on in his time in this temple, in this Buddhist monastery out in the country, and I want to get the name of the place correct. I believe the town is Panomsarakram, Panomsarakram. He mentions the loneliness in the first few months. He didn't really know a lot of these monks. Some of them were kind of giving him the cold shoulder, or just because he wasn't a native Thai, they were kind of keeping their distance, not sure how to really judge this person that kind of came from outside their realm. And in a way, this was good because it provided him time for meditation and time to work on his chants, which are a big part of being a monk, these mantras, these chants. But another way, kind of stymied some of his ability to advance as a monk because he wasn't really learning anything from anybody. He was learning some stuff from books, and he was being self-reflective, but wasn't really engaging as part of the monk community, if you will, even though that's kind of counterintuitive. One thing that he did mention is that some of the tombs, and I guess they weren't really tombs, but they cremate their dead in Thai culture, and then the ashes are put in like these little bricks that are specially marked and put around, often put around temples and monasteries. And so he would go around and sweep these bricks off of his ancestors in a certain part of the temple that where his family line came from. He also mentioned that there was a pool that they gathered at, and it wasn't even so much what happened there, but just kind of it was a daily meeting place, and the description of it of being sort of this brown putrid color, but we often think of brown as just kind of gross, but it kind of that with the saffron and the orange, the muted orange of the Thai robes really created a visceral image kind of early on in this book that I really liked. He mentioned that during these meeting times, they would often meet at this pool or this pond in the monastery, and then go collect alms early in the morning from the village. And often this wouldn't be a monetary donation, but would be the food ration that the monks would eat for the day. They'd never keep food in the monastery. They would just go into town and have these bowls that they would hold above their head, and then devotees from the town would give the monks most often rice, and then some of the wealthier ones would give other means of substance, like small pieces of fish or curry packets or whatever. But where this book really got going was when he went out to the countryside, and I want to say Assam. I should have researched this ahead of time, but I believe it is Assam. And what they did is he went out with one other monk named let's try this, Narang. Yeah. Narang, who was sort of an eccentric full-time monk, so he was one of the few monks in the temple that was going to, or at least planned to, be a monk for the rest of his life. They went out to this rural forest temple, and I want to say the Assam region, which is like the northeast part of the country, very poor, near the Thai border. Yeah, but this is where I feel the book really took off, because although the number of monks in this place were much smaller than the temple that he had been in at this other place, in this forest kind of temple, it was really just a bunch of shacks. He really got to know the one monk that went with him, Naram, and then the three other monks that he met there that lived in the forest full time, which I think were Nui, Pong, and Ag, A-E-G. And so he got to know them much better than he did most of the other monks at the temple, and was really kind of able to embrace the monk lifestyle. And even beyond this, Nurang, who was really the key secondary figure in the book, they went out of this main temple and went into the local villages on what I think was like a week ish trip, where he really, really got into the rural regions of towns of, just like a few huts or a few people. He got to see, like the dilapidated temples compared to like the temple they were staying in the first town, Panoramakrung, or whatever it was pretty big. It wasn't like Bangkok, it wasn't like a huge temple, but it was big enough that it was sort of functionatory and had its little niches and sects and, various people that did various things. We saw some of these temples out in the countryside where there was like one monk or two monks, And then he also saw some of the depravity of the countryside, some of the poverty. He got to see, like these people that would, I guess we would call them Sunday Christians if we were relating this to the Western church, where they would be devout to the temple in the morning. This is not monks, but this is people that would like help out the monks by almsgiving in the morning, by caring for the monks. But then once noontime, and particularly, or once afternoon and nighttime came around, these exact same people were drunkards, full of gambling, wild karaoke. I'm sure there was, stuff with women involved. And once again, not on a large scale like in Bangkok, but just sort of like your local yokel rednecks living it up out in the countryside. But he also mentions kind of some of the serenity of this place. This river that he travels up and down that's connected to this forest temple in the Assam region. A lot of times he would say around dusk, people would from these small villages would light these fires like along the river, and he could go sit up on a cliff because the trail along the river the trail parallel to the river was up along this cliff, and so you could look down over the cliff, over the river, and see these fires right along the river as they slowly lit up one by one as dusk came. And it was a very cerebral moment. And then with the monks that he sees in the forest temple, he really kind of contrasts the three. Aig, I believe, is sort of like the AEG, is the oldest and sort of the matriarch. He instills wisdom, but just sort of more like practical advice or whatever. And then Nui, which is the middle monk, was the one that really challenged Jaed spiritually. They had an extensive conversation about who is the Buddha, why did you come to this place, where is the Buddha to be found. And I should also say Narang, who was the monk that came from the main village, or the main temple, out to this forest temple, and so was the secondary, main character in this book, besides Jaed. He was often challenged too, where is the Buddha, where you can find him, which is often something what Jaed tried to find, and they had arguments about it, because Narang thought that it was in isolation in some cave. You should just go into a cave where he could have some food, but other than the fact that he would have some food, he would have no worldly possessions, and he would just sit in the cave the rest of his life. And Jaed, being the man that traveled halfway around the world to this forest temple, saw this as very wrong. He said, the Buddha is everywhere. It's in the forest, it's in the city, it's in the chaos, it's in the serenity, it's everywhere. Well, what Nui really challenged him on is the Buddha is not either in the isolation of the cave nor in everywhere in everyday life, but it's within us. It's within our hearts. And there was, I forget exactly what was said, but there was a very moving passage within the book about how Jaed really tried to challenge Nui, and then Nui came back and really said the Buddha must be found within, not without. So that was good. And then the last monk was, I think it was, oh yeah, and I'm actually on the chapter right here. He says, the Buddha is what it is it's within the heart, but it's within the unsure heart. The heart that is sure is the heart that is overly self-confident, that it's in your unsure moments that the truth really emerges. And wow, I can even feel this talking about this in my personal life. That's very true. The strength of our heart is not shown when we're at our most confident, but when we're at our greatest depths, that's when we can really, reach within and find ourselves. And if you're Buddhist, maybe find the Buddha or find enlightenment. So this last nun is, I believe, Nang, and he's, on the surface, he's the least cordial of the three. But he never talks the entire time, but in sort of his silence, and it's mentioned it's kind of a curmudgeon-y silence, like he's kind of whatever. He allows some distance to the people to know, or to Jaed and Narang, the two other monks, to just know that you can be part of our forest world, but not every answer is tied with a perfect bow on top, and not everything is immediately on the surface. Sometimes you have to work for it, which I think was kind of the point of his silence. So anyway, Jaed goes back to the temple on Kalpasan, which is the first day of planting, being an auspicious day to go back to the main temple in, I'm going to get this name right, in Panosarikram. So he goes back. He spends another couple weeks being a monk, or maybe it was like another month being a monk. And he had some interesting encounters. Really, he kind of saw some of the poverty of the community, and I felt that maybe this was where the book was kind of weak, is he didn't really get into that community as much as I'd maybe like him to. Maybe that would have required a little more extensive stay in this community. But what he really did was contrasted some of the monks, other monks that came in from the outside. There was one monk named Go, that was actually his name, who was British Thai, and was sort of your classic rough him up, not really low class, but kind of like really status driven Englishman. I don't, there's a specific word for it, but I'm not English, so I don't know the exact type, but very sort of pompous, in your face, look who I am kind of Englishman, young Englishman, who's only there to service his mother. Now, that's the same reason Jaed went, was because of his mother's lineage, but he actually tried to embrace the lifestyle and fully, whereas this guy was just blowing him off. And Jaed specifically said, I wish this person didn't exist. Not that I wanted to hurt them, but I wish that they wouldn't just exist as a person, because they just embody everything that I hate about breezing over your culture and not trying to embrace things authentically or whatever. And then the other monk you mentioned was that was kind of breezing over his Buddhist experience, who Jaed was critical of, was a Chinese Thai monk who was heavily involved in business, who seemed a little more genuine in, well, did he? I don't know. He said basically like he was only there for 2 weeks and he was just doing it as sort of a vacation, which is kind of very surface, but at least he wasn't like a complete pompous idiot like the British Thai guy was. Those are just two characters. That doesn't say anything about the culture. That's just kind of the two characters in the book. So finally, Jaed leaves temple, and the last about 40 pages of this book is about his relationship with a Week, who is a village girl, who he has a crush on, and it starts to develop. They take some rides out on motorbikes together while delivering food for an aunt, or on some sort of errands, and they become close. But then, kind of as the markers start counting down to when the scheduled flight leaves, tensions start building. They don't really get angry at each other, but you can just see them kind of growing apart slowly, steadily. It's kind of sad. It's actually kind of sad in the way that I had a personal circumstance like that recently. But we won't get into that. But yeah, I mean, just it's sort of like the doomed relationship from the start, where they really loved one another, but then well, I don't know if they even loved one another, but they really felt a special connection, but it just wasn't meant to be. And Jaed mentions after he leaves how, well, he mentions when he leaves how sad it is, not just leaving this girl Leek, but leaving kind of the community. He really almost develops a closer relationship to some of the people in the community than he did some of the monks in the temple. Now that's maybe the nature of being a monk in a temple, where you meditate, you go out in alms and you rarely talk, and you meditate for 8 hours a day, and really just, other than interaction for philosophy's purpose, interaction really isn't encouraged among the monks. Other than like classes or something to bring philosophical thought about the Buddha into place. But when he leaves the village people and the monks, and it's kind of sad because he mentions like Narong, the one monk that he did get to know really, really well, how sad it is leaving him. He was the guy that was in the forest. And how sad that was. And he mentions that after he leaves, in the final chapter, which is actually a chant to Sooth Wild Elephants, same as the name of the book. Right. How he tried to contact Leek, and like any sort of thing, they had just grown apart and it didn't work out. Like he emailed her, but then somebody had to read an email, and it was just very kind of awkward. This, of course, being halfway around the world. And then he mentioned kind of briefly the few travels they had done since then. Been to Spain, been to, I believe, Alaska, for various, kind of odds and ends jobs. And finally confronted his mother in that he wanted to be a writer. And it kind of ends self-referential to the book itself and him finding the fact that he wanted to be an author and writing about his time as a monk in Thailand. So, A Chant to Sooth Wild Elephants, a memoir by Jaed Coffin. I will say one quick thing about sort of the semantics of this book. This was a very, very quick read. It's not that it's a short book, it's 200 pages, but I got this done in maybe like 3 days. So, anyway, A Chant to Sooth Wild Elephants by Jaed Coffin. I said Cohen. Jaed Coffin. There you go. I think that's him right up there, but his face is getting cut off by the barcode. So anyway, thank you guys. I'll see you later, and peace.